You'd be surprised to know how afraid people are with being honest to the ones they love and socialize with on a day-to-day basis. How easy it has become for people to live lives in the closet, subjected to fear and the embedded forces to adhere to the ethics and ideology of the dominant culture. Not only do I see it every day, but I live in it. And at one time, I forced myself to be what the world said was normal. But what of the nonconformists? Those who choose to live outside the norm of the dominant culture? What of the nonconformists, the ones who choose to live their lives for themselves? Well, some become targets, examples of what some conformists won't accept, while many people see the scrutiny and the victimization and choose to look the other way.
Somewhere in Des Moines or San Antonio, there's a young gay person who all of a sudden realizes that she or he is gay, knows that if the parents find out, they'll be tossed out of the house. The classmates would taunt the child, and the Anita Bryants and John Briggs are doing their bit on TV, and that child has several options. Staying in a closet, suicide, and then one day that child might open a paper and it says homosexual elected in San Francisco, and there are two new options. The option is to go to California, stay in San Antonio and fight. 2 days after I was elected, I got a phone call. The voice was quite young. It was from Altoona, Pennsylvania. And the person said, thanks. And you've got to let gay people know that that young child and the thousands and thousands like that child know that there's hope for a better world. There's hope for a better tomorrow. Without hope, not only gays, but those blacks, the Asians, the disabled, the seniors, the S's, without hope, the S's give up. I know that you cannot live on hope alone, but without it, life is not worth living. And you gotta give them hope.
The gay rights movement is fairly new to the United States, and even today we are still fighting for equality. Before the 20th century, same-sex sexual behavior and cross-dressing were widely considered to be socially unacceptable and were serious crimes under sodomy and sumptuary laws. However, with the great art of theater, cross-dressing was common. Let's understand some movements that took place in the 20th century and to date. The homophile movement 1945 through 1969. Immediately following World War II, a number of homosexual rights groups came into being. These groups usually preferred the term homophile to homosexual, emphasizing love over sex. One Inc. was the first public homosexual organization in the United States. The homophile movement lobbied to establish a prominent influence in political systems of social acceptability. Radicals of the 1970s would later disparage the homophile groups for being assimilationists. Any demonstrations were orderly and polite. The new social movements of the 1960s, such as the Black Power, inspired some LGBT activists to become more radical, and the gay liberation movement of 1969 through 1974 emerged towards the end of the decade. This new radicalism is often attributed to the Stonewall riots of 1969, when a group of transsexuals, lesbians, drag queens, and gay male patrons at a bar in New York resisted a police raid. Immediately after Stonewall, such groups as the Gay Liberation Front and the Gay Activists Alliance were formed. Their use of the word gay represented a new unapologetic defiance as an antonym for straight, respectable sexual behavior. During LGBT rights movement 1972 through present, bisexuals became more visible in the LGBT rights movement in the 1970s. From the anarchist gay liberation movement of the early 1970s arose a more reformist and single-issue gay rights movement, which portrayed gays and lesbians as a minority group and used the language of civil rights, in many respects continuing the work of the homophile movement.